Today we're going to focus on the power of storytelling, but not just any storytelling. This kind of storytelling is going to show you how you can demonstrate that you are a good fit for a company so you can get the job or promotion that you desire. Don't go away, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Get Hired. In today's show, we're going to be talking about how the correct form of storytelling can help you get hired or get the promotion that you desire. Welcome to Get Hired. My name is Bridgetti Lim Banda from Cape Town in South Africa, and I will shortly introduce you to my amazing co-host for today, Teresa Dukes. Now, if you missed the very first episode of Get Hired, you will have noticed that we talked a lot about the things that you can use in your interview so that you can get hired, because a lot of interviews today are still being conducted online. And the reason for that is, thanks to the pandemic, it's opened up brand new opportunities for many of us. Previously, you would work in your own location where you were whether you're in South Africa, in the UK, or the USA, or Australia, you'd get a job where you live. But now, thanks to the pandemic and thanks to the way in which online opportunities have opened up, you can work globally. But that also means interviews are taking place online. So, how do you show up your best? And how can you put your best foot forward? We covered that in the very first episode. Of Get Hired, but here's just a few quick reminders. One of the things is that if you're used to going live online, you would normally hold your phone in portrait mode. So one of the tips that we gave you in those very first episode was to turn your phone into landscape mode so that you can be seen properly. It'll get rid of those black lines. If you wondered what the black lines on the side were, turn your phone into landscape mode. Now, ideally, you do want to use a tripod of some kind, because you do not want to conduct an interview with your phone in your hand, because invariably it will shake, it will make your interviewer feel seasick, and you will not impress your interviewer. And you can use any kind of tripod. I mean, you can take your pick. There are hundreds of different forms of tripods. Literally, just find one that works. If you don't have one, here's a very quick hack. You can actually just literally take your phone, tape it to the window with sticky tape or press stick, tic tac, whatever you want to use. Tape your phone to the window. The great part about that is that you can have your phone at the 90-degree angle, which is the perfect angle for video recording. And you are also going to have front-facing light, which is what you want. That was another point that we highlighted in the first episode of Get Hired. You don't want lighting from behind because it'll make you look dark and your interviewer is not going to see you. So you want front-facing light. Also, if you want to just level up a little bit from that, you could invest in a lavalier microphone so you can be heard clearly. And again, there are tons and tons of microphones, and these things are not expensive. They're really, really cheap. And you don't want to get background noise. So if you don't get a separate microphone, just get some earphones. Use some earphones. That'll also get rid of background noise and you'll be heard clearly. So these are some simple ways, very, very easy, simple, cheap ways in which you can level up so that you get hired or get the promotion and show up your best when you are going for your interview. So, without any further ado, we want to get on to today's topic, which is how storytelling, and not just any stories. Teresa's going to dive right into the right kind of storytelling that you can employ to get the job or the promotion you desire. So, Teresa is a certified world class speaking coach. She's a best selling author. She's also the co founder of Interview Survival Guide. She's trained more than 30,000 people worldwide in effective communication skills. So she can help you be heard, understood, and remembered. So without any further ado, Teresa, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Thank you, Bridgetti. I'm absolutely fantastic. It has been a wonderful day here in the UK. There is no rain today.
Wonderful, 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 wonderful. Oh my goodness, I am so excited. I just love storytelling. Um, And I think, we've all got different kinds of storytelling, but I'm really keen on diving into the kind of storytelling that you would employ. But maybe if you can just start off with explaining why storytelling is so important in your interview process. What is the connection?
Okay, I mean, and that's a really good place to start, because we are all about interviews, and every aspect of our life, we are actually in a lifelong interview. So these stories can be used whether you're in an interview situation or you find yourself in front of your boss negotiating for a pay rise, or maybe you just want to impress somebody and deliver a speech that actually gives you an opportunity to use a story that will help you make a point. And that's the important bit here. We absolutely want you to be able to make your point through stories. These stories that you pick, they help give that interviewer a chance to have a conversation with you. And I don't know about you, but if you've ever been in an interview and they ask you a question and you give them one sentence replies, they kind of look at each other and they go, and? So we don't want you to be caught out. And when you use stories, they will help bring alive that little element or that little highlight of a skill that you want to show them that you have really, really a major strength in through that story. So our CV can only do so much. It can give us little bullet points, but the stories help those little bullet points just come alive. And that's why it's really important for you to start picking those appropriate stories when you're preparing for an interview or any sort of gathering, meeting that you're gonna be in front of somebody of influence. Yeah.
Teresa, can you give me an example of what would be an inappropriate story to tell in your interview?
Well, I mean, everybody thinks they have all their stories up here. And the most inappropriate thing you can do is to have never practiced any of those stories. So when you go for one that you think, oh yeah, that's the one, but you've never said it out loud, it will come out all wrong. And more than likely, if you haven't identified the key point you're wanting to get across or the key skill you're trying to showcase, you're going to be all over the place. You're going to waffle. You're going to give inappropriate information or irrelevant information, and that's worse. So the stories, example of a really bad story is when they ask you a question about conflict and you talk about something you did with your dog on a walk, right? So it has to be relevant to the job you're going for, the story that you choose, and it has to have a purpose, which means that whatever skill that you're trying to put a spotlight on, you have to pick the story that will highlight that skill. And that's the purpose of the story. Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. So it's not just storytelling for the sake of stories. You know, you're going to bore the death out of your interviewer, and you're actually going to not get that job or the promotion that you're hoping to get. So your story has to have a purpose, and it has to be very, very relevant. And I do want to pick up on what you said earlier. Practice, 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 practice. You can't have enough practice because you want to perfect that story. I was talking to somebody yesterday, an author who's also a publisher, and she was saying how, you know, some stories have an emotional effect on us, but the more we tell the story, the more that emotional we can distance ourselves from the emotion because we've told the story so many times. And I think that sort of emphasized the whole thing of the importance of practice and why coaching is important, because I think it's one of the points that I stress often in our show is that when you have a coach in, you know, that's part of your interview process that helps you get through your interview, your coach doesn't have that emotional attachment to the story that you do, and it allows you to separate yourself, and they can tell you when you are relating your story in a manner that's not going to get you hired. You know, you're going to pick up the snags in the manner that the person tells the story, correct?
And that's spot on. I concur with everything that you said because, you know, I'm working with about 4 or 5 different clients right now going for interviews, and we spend like an hour on one story. We focus on a particular question that they may be going for, and they have to identify the most strategic story to use in order to answer this particular question. And they'll throw out different stories and we'll go, well, is that high enough? Is that in depth enough? Have you unpacked it already? And many times they've not spoken about the particular story ever. And so then we spend that time uncovering the magic that is in the mess. And I love doing that. I love drawing out the key elements.
Parts that are important.
The parts that are important, absolutely. Because if you give them all of the little minute details, they don't need all of that. They need to know what is it that you want them to take away from that story. What is that skill that you're putting the spotlight on? And that's where a lot of people forget, well, I've got this great story and, you know, I had a good time doing it and we solved this wonderful problem, but they never identify the skill that they're trying to, get across. And, you know, when we look at any person going for an interview, they have a job description that is in front of them, and it lists all the competencies that organization is looking for them to have. So if you haven't looked at that job description with the essential requirements, and those are the competencies they're looking for, and then found a story in your own CV that could match that competency, then you are not prepared enough to be able to go for that interview. You absolutely need to match up your competencies with their competencies, your strengths with their competencies. And my advice to every single person I work with is to make sure if they've got 5 competencies listed, then you need to have 3 stories for each one, because they're going to ask you more and more questions surrounding that particular area. And they want to know that you have more than just one little story you're telling for all of them. And if you do that, they're going, well, you don't have very much experience, do you? We might just like, is it the circular bin number 13? Yeah. Put them in that filing cabinet.
Absolutely. Yeah. You've got to be very concise
Yes.
about your story,
Mhm.
and tell it in a manner that's believable and relatable to and relevant to the interview. I just want to give a big shout out to our audience over on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Amazon Live, on Twitter, on Twitch. Great to have you guys. A very warm welcome to all of you. So lovely to have you in the audience. Totally appreciative of that. So where does one go and find stories that are relevant, Teresa? How would you know from where to harvest these stories?
And that's a really great question, because so many people just think that they need to look at their existing place of employment for examples or their achievements. And I always say to people, of course, that's a great starting point. Your existing job, the existing role that you're in, absolutely. Go and look at the things you have achieved, the successes that have happened, the accomplishments that you've been recognized for, because they will be highlighting a particular skill that you've brought to the table. But I want you to think wider and much more broad as far as where these stories can be found, because we get involved in things outside of work, don't we? We get involved in volunteer organizations. You may be on a community board that is looking out for the safety of your particular neighborhood, or you may be doing, a little league team where you're coaching youngsters in football or karate or whatever it is. And those areas of your life actually can bring even more stories that will highlight different skills that you're using outside that are transferable. And people forget about that. So go look everywhere in your everyday life, and don't just stick to what you're doing right now. That's relevant, but everything else surrounding your entire life is relevant as well. Yeah.
That absolutely makes sense, and it reminds me of a previous episode where we were talking about, somebody having to take a break in their career, for example, to go and take care of a family member that was ill.
Mhm.
That's a story also worth telling, because it speaks to the kind of character, personal character that you have, that can also be a huge strength within the organization, because people are attracted to people who have great people skills, people who have
Exactly.
empathy, people who have emotional intelligence. So, I mean, to me, that's a great example of emotional intelligence, when you know that, it's more important to spend time with a loved one who is dying than to be at your job at that time.
Yeah.
And that explains why you had a break in your employment. So that's a story worth telling. Um,
And that's
and
a really
something
big
that you may
question.
forget, but, having a coach will bring that out for you.
Mm. And that's exactly what happened with this individual. They hadn't unpacked that story, and they were seeing it as a weakness, but in fact it was an actual strength, because it showed their ability to take some time out and take care of that loved one. And it also showed that the company were accepting of that situation. And if they weren't, then you don't want to be in that job anyway, right? Because that's a time of our life where, when we're helping a loved one find their way into the next world, we need support all around us, our job, our family, our friends, everything. So if you're in a position, in a job that doesn't support that type of experience, then you need to be looking for somewhere else to go. That's my opinion. Okay. But the wonderful thing about these stories is, once you do unpack them, either with yourself or friends or with a coach, and the coach actually kind of helps draw out the magic from it, you can focus on the key elements that are the most important, and it can be flipped, I guess you could say. If you're viewing it as a negative, you can flip it to view it as a positive. And that's what the hiring manager is looking for. They want to know, how can you deal with a situation that may be complicated, but you have managed to deal with it in an effective manner, because that skill is really valuable in the role that you may be going for.
And again, I continuously want to stress the value of investing in yourself by hiring a coach, is because sometimes you see your story from just one perspective, and your perspective generally is a clouded one, and so it may be more difficult for you to find the silver lining in that particular experience, but your coach will be able to extrapolate the gem from there and say to you, yes, it's negative, but this is how we can switch it and make it into something positive, even if it was a really, really bad experience.
Exactly. And I was working with somebody this morning, and they said, well, I had this experience. They had had a bad day. They'd had a bad day yesterday. And I said, okay, well, let's start our coaching session with something positive. What do you appreciate about this week, right? And they came back with this really big project that they were able to work on at work to distract them from whatever was causing them to have a bad day, a bad week. And when they brought out this particular story, I'm listening to it as they deliver it, and it's about management crisis and maintaining mission critical systems, and it was a wonderful story that was really highlighting the ability to look at things with that strategic hat on, ensure that you have a plan in place to deal with anything that goes wrong, and that you communicate the situation immediately to all of your clients that are using that particular system, and not wait until the morning when everybody else just had problems overnight to tell them, oh, by the way, we were down last night. Yeah. So he really kind of brought a story to life that actually will serve him well when it comes to any sort of question that deals with crisis. Yeah. And it's just a throwaway comment. What did you do to, appreciate today? And it pulls out interesting things.
I think that's a phenomenal example, because, we live in a time now where hacking, for example, is a huge threat. It's a global threat, and it's happening to large organizations, small organizations. It can happen to any organization, and how do you deal with that? A lot of companies may not want to admit to the fact that they've been hacked, even though, there is an obligation to disclose when you've been hacked. But how you deal with that situation is going to be key. And then how you relate that situation to others is also going to be key. It's going to say a lot about your personality and who you are, in how you tell that story. So you've really, really, really got to have your ducks in a row before you go public with something like that, because it can go very, very wrong. And I think that's an example of how really important storytelling is, and to know how you're going to say and what you're going to say in a manner that sounds believable. Because I think people forget that other people who hear what you're saying can pick that apart, and there are nuances that other people are going to pick up that you may not be aware of. Correct?
And I just wanted to touch on that, because you said sounds credible, or sounds believable. But when you are telling your story from your own experience, and we've developed it, and we've put it into the format that will allow you to bring out those key elements, it will be internalized, which means that it is totally believable because you are talking from experience and from years of experience and knowledge dealing with that particular situation. So when you internalize your story, that means, again, we go back to the practice. You practice, 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 say it out loud as many times as possible to somebody, to the trees, to the dogs, to whatever, to a video platform that allows you to listen back to it. So you can go, oh, I really messed up there because I really wanted to emphasize that this was the key point I was getting across. So you can go back and review it while you're still developing that story so that it is here. I always say, get out of your head, get into your heart. Because once you get into your heart, the stories just come out. You can talk about them forever because you believe in what you're saying. And then that allows the interviewer to believe what you're saying as well.
Absolutely. I love what you're saying. Get it out of your head and get it into your heart, because people can also people listen to the intonation in your voice. You know, the if your voice doesn't sound believable, people can tell by the tone in your voice whether you are spinning a story or not. And so being able to to perfect your story is such a key point. But now there are also certain things that we need to avoid, or kind of stories that we need to avoid. Can we talk a little bit about what those are? You know, like what kind of stories would be the wrong ones?
So, I always ask individuals, tell me about a time when you and your boss didn't get along. And whenever that question comes up, they automatically get defensive. They automatically change their tone. They automatically go, oh, they were horrible. We didn't get along. Everything was just doom and gloom. And I sit back and I let them vent for a little while. And then I go, now, if you were sat in front of an interviewer and you went off just like that, do you think you'd be asked back for a second interview? And they go, no, probably not. So we want to be very careful that, one, the story that we pick, we have unpacked. We have, like we've said with your previous interviewee, that you have had a chance to deal with the emotion that's wrapped around that story. Because if you have not, then you will come across defensive. You will feel like they're trying to throw you under the bus. And then, in fact, you throw the boss under the bus. And you definitely don't want to do that.
Or yourself at worst.
Or yourself. And that's exactly what you'll be doing. If you approach it from an emotional point of view, because you haven't unpacked that story, it will not get you an invite back. But the other type of stories that you basically want to try and avoid are ones that have no relevance to the job. Because you could be this most wonderful, you put events together and you encourage people to come along, but the job that you're running, you're applying for, is an IT job, which means you're going to be behind a desk and you're going to be software programming possibly. So that story has nothing to do with the job you're going for. So that's why I really focus on people picking the relevant stories for the job you're going for, and not the ones you had fun doing. Yeah.
I know, because sometimes you can get really excited about something, because it's your favorite event in your life, but it has no relevance to that job. And so, again, there's the value in having a coach that can talk you through your stories. And then I think something else we also mentioned before in one of the previous episodes was having not just one, two, but maybe a couple of stories, because you never know in which direction the interview is going to go. So ideally, what would you recommend is there kind of like, do you say you should have about 4, 5, 6 stories? What is your recommendation around stories? And do you actually teach people when to segue or how to segue into another story depending on what the interviewer asks? Is that part of the sort of whole
Yeah.
preparation process?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things that we love doing is getting people to start thinking about those relevant stories and to start building them in a bank of stories journal. So whether you decide you're going to write them down with a pen or you're going to type them and put them into a Word document, our advice is to start collecting them now. Have the example like on one side of the paper or the page, and then on the other side, have the skill that you're trying to highlight or spotlight associated with that particular story. And that story may apply to quite a few different categories. It may apply to leadership or analyticals or maybe teamwork. And you can put those different categories there against each of the different stories. But for every category, and this takes us all the way back to our job description, you have those requirements already built in there. So when you are building that bank of stories journal, then you need to look at those competencies. And if there's 5 there, each one should get 3 stories, 3 different stories. Yeah. So 3 leadership stories, 3 team building stories, 3 analytical stories, 3 communication stories, 3 interpersonal interaction type, critical conflict. Yeah. Every competency, you need to have at least 3 stories. And if I wanted to push you a little bit harder, I would say 5. And the beauty about having more than one story for each of those categories is there is a high percentage likelihood that they're going to ask you more than one question on leadership. So you better have more than one example to use. And if you get double-barreled questions, because that happens so many times, they go, well, tell me about a time when you faced conflict, and then tell me what did you do to overcome that and make it more positive, right? And you get those, it's like, oh my God, and it's picking the story that will give you that first answer, and then maybe segue into a second story that helps position that strength even more effectively. So you can segue with 2 stories, or you can continue on the path of just the one that really focuses specifically on what they're looking for in the position that you're going for. So start that bank of stories. It's what I would say to everybody. Start collecting your stories and start putting the categories against them. And then we can get on to the Star Plus, and that's where you flesh it out. We talk about that a lot.
And again, I mean, as I'm listening to you, all I'm thinking in my head is practice, 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 practice. And, see how those stories will cement a possible offer for you. It can either sort of be the cement that gets you the job, or it can make all the bricks come apart, depending on how you tell that story, or if you tell it incorrectly or use it in an incorrect instance. And again, there's so much value in having a coach and just to guide you through all this quagmire of instances that you can have where you can possibly go wrong with incorrect storytelling.
And Aletta and I always talk about you can never be too prepared. And with a lot of the courses that we do, the people that come out of them, they're going, hey, I thought I was prepared until I took your course. And it's because we uncover all of the elements that it takes to help you stand out as that ideal candidate. And we were talking earlier, you and I, about an on-demand course that Aletta and I are launching.
I was actually going to ask you about that. So because we're just about sort of heading towards the end of the show now. So if you could maybe just explain to people what that is all about and how they could benefit from that, that'll be great.
Yeah, we've had a lot of people that we've worked with that came to us and were able to fit into our schedule, because we would run a 6 weeks long course where you would come onto a 2 hour call once a week, and then we would give you assignments and you would do them, and you come back the next week and we would carry on with the next theory. But so many people were saying, I can't make a Tuesday, I can't make a Thursday. So they wanted more flexibility. They wanted to do it in their own time. They wanted to be able to work at their own pace. And so we listened and we answered them. And we have launched just this past month the Interview Mastery on Demand course, which is an online course. They can go in, do each of the 6 modules in their own time. Every module has about 5 to 7 lessons within it. So it works you through the theory of the different elements, the power of stories, how to answer difficult questions, how to sell your assets, how to interview the interviewer, all these things that we've been talking about on our particular live streamings here, but put into one little package that they can go in and actually purchase and work on their own. It's on our website, which is www.interviewsurvivalguide.com /interview mastery on demand. And I don't know if you can put that in the comments or whatever, but we're offering a really special price if you go on today and purchase it. It normally goes for £450 for this access. But if you put in the code on demand today, you will be able to get it for £315. And that's a 30% discount just for being on this call with us today. So I think that's it's an excellent program. It's taken everything that we've done with our online students and have given it to them to where you can have access to this material forever. Once you buy it, it's yours to use. There we
Well,
go.
that's an excellent opportunity. So thanks for mentioning that to the audience today. So if you're watching us live today, there's a great opportunity for you to get on-demand coaching. Teresa, thank you so much, and just a huge big shout out and thank you to our audience again today for joining us live, and whether you catching the on-demand version of today's episode. Every single episode we've had of the Interview Survival Guide and teaching you how to get hired, the principles of what we share is evergreen. So whether you're watching this episode now, 6 months from now, 2 years from now, the information in here is evergreen. It's always going to help you to get the job or get the promotion that you desired. So again, once again, thank you to our live audience. Thank you to our on-demand audience. Teresa, thank you so much for the golden nuggets that we shared. And again, we talked about a special on-demand offer that's available. Go and check that out. It's only of great benefit to you. Thank you so much, everyone. It was amazing spending some time with you. And for now, we're going to say goodbye until we see you in the next episode of Get Hired with some more practical advice to help you get the job or the promotion that you desired. Stay safe, take care until next time, and goodbye for now.